So, as at least half of the room probably knows, Happy Feast Day. Today's a great feast in the Egyptian community.
Really?
Not necessarily in the Coptic church, right? But in the community.
Oh,
Is Egyptian enough? Yeah, 6 October. As I just got a... Mabruk, everyone. Glad he's with us. So the reason I mentioned that is because it's going to be relevant a little bit to our topic today, as I just got a little history lesson over lunch from my dad. Explain to me what 6 October was. Can someone give me a quick rundown of what was the hurdle? Not the whole story, I don't want to hear the whole story. Huh? Okay. Very spiritual. From a military standpoint, what made 6th of October, a big deal? Anybody know? If you don't, okay, from a military standpoint, the big deal was Israel took over Sinai Peninsula thing and built like a giant mountain of sand, correct? Like a big sand mountain. Essentially. That's Laura. Yes. So it was a giant sand... Huh? Yes. I don't know what it is, but it's a giant sand mountain. That's confirmed. Trust me, Wikipedia that's for sure. Wikipedia that. So this giant sand mountain made it a problem for the Egyptian military people to go to where they need to go. Enter our context for today's talk, Matthew 16:18. If you have Bibles, take them out. We already talked about this verse, just remind me, because I don't remember what I talked about. If not, it'll be a fun verse talk. Matthew 16:18.
Matthew 16:18.
Correct. This is one verse. If it takes a while to bring it up, I could just tell you. Well, if anybody have it, just read it for us. Anyone have it?
Yeah.
You have it? Good. Monica.
And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it.
Okay. Everyone catch that? One more time, Monica. Especially the last part. I will build my church, and
the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it.
Okay. We're familiar with this conversation, right? St. Peter, restored by Christ. And then Christ gives him one of the most important promises in the New Testament. However, for some reason, it's one of the verses that we sometimes misinterpret, or we lose the benefit of a promise. Imagine in our context before with the 6th October thing, if God had promised the people of Egypt, don't worry, this gigantic mountain of sand will not overtake you. Or when Christ said here, don't worry, no matter what happens, you will not be overtaken by a gate. Has anybody here ever been attacked by a gate?
By a gate?
Yeah, gate. Like, has a door ever, like, really invaded your privacy?
I walked into a door.
You walked into a door. Okay, that's expected. Anyone else? Has anyone else been attacked by a gate? No, you probably weren't attacked by a gate, right? Why?
They don't usually do that.
Because gates don't usually do that, because gates are offensive or defensive things. Defensive things. But why is it, do you think, that sometimes we in the church take this verse, very spiritual Coptic sense, to say, okay, God will protect us. We in the church, we will not be attacked by gates. As long as we're in the church, we are safe. We will not be attacked. You see what I'm saying? When you look at how this verse is understood by our hearts, we look at it and say, the gates of Hades will not overtake the church. We are safe inside the church, which is true. As a side note, there's safety, the whole ark, in the architecture of the church, salvation, all that stuff is true. But what Christ is trying to tell Peter in this verse, and trying to tell us, his church, today, is that we're supposed to actually go to the gates. Not wait for the gates to come to us. It's like that Egyptian army that actually went to that giant sand mountain thing. Because it's no good if a promise is saying to you, don't worry, you will not be attacked by mountains. It doesn't help you. But if the promise is telling you, when you attack mountains, mountains will move, that helps you. Doesn't it? It helps you both in your own spiritual life, because like I read a nice quote that said, like, you know, faith moves mountains and fear creates them. We create a lot of mountains in our own spiritual life. Granted, for good reasons, for bad reasons. We have all these mountains in our own personal spiritual life, and then there are mountains and there are gates in Staten Island, in our community, that also this promise applies to. The promise that God gave, that this gate will not overtake the church. Right? Or does it not? Because if it doesn't, then we can pretend that it doesn't. Because there's the thing with God's promises, like when we as servants like search the Bible, there are some promises that are like God writing a check. And it doesn't matter how great the check is if you just never cash it. Meaning, there are some promises, there are some things that God says, when you are in this situation, I will do X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter if we never put ourselves in that situation. See what I'm saying? Say if God is saying to you, if you ask me for forgiveness, I will forgive you. Well, that promise is very nice, it's beautiful, it's great, like in the gospel today and stuff like that. But who cares how much God's forgiveness is if I will never ask for forgiveness? Or, if God is saying, if you will go step to a gate, I will overtake that gate for you. Who cares if I never step to the gate? You know how earlier this week there was a real feast in the Coptic Church, right? We had the Feast of the Cross. Right? Or my Coptic off, I don't know. So we were having a little sit down with one personality, and he was reminding us of one of these facts about the cross. You know how in the liturgy, you know, Buddha makes a lot of hand gestures in the liturgy. Some of them are significant. I'm sure all of them are. Some of them I don't catch all of them. You know that one move when Buddha goes like this, and he takes a little one of these guys, right? What does he say during that part? My man Simpson doing it right over here.
Simpson.
He's cool. Okay, because earlier today, some people may or may not have called him by a different name. So he said, what?
He descended into Hades through the cross.
Why did Jesus descend into Hades through the cross?
So like to get the people that were there.
Why didn't they just come? Why didn't they just figure it out? Like, there's no shuttle service. No, there was no shuttle service.
He's the gate.
He's the gate. Oh, he's like the connection between those who have fallen and those who need to get up again. But he was reminding us, and the reason why, you were definitely right. But here's the problem. What if there's death on the cross, there's salvation that happened, and then Jesus never descends into Hades through the cross? What happens to people in Hades?
Stay in Hades.
They chill at Hades. Nothing happens to people in Hades. What if, here in Staten Island, 4095 Amboy Road, we proclaim there is salvation, there's goodness, there's great, great, great things in 4095 Amboy Road? What happens to people who are not attending the Egyptian festival and don't get a tour and don't hear about the salvation that is great in Staten Island?
They never realized how
Nothing happens. If they don't, they remain where they are unless we descend into Hades through the cross. That's what it means to be a follower of the cross. The cross, as we all know, we've all given sermons and Sunday school things about it and stuff like that. It's not supposed to be the thing on our necklace. It's not supposed to be just a little green tattoo. Buddha Tedros was telling us how it's supposed to be the vehicle by which we descend into darkness to bring light. Into darkness, though. It's more comfortable for us, naturally. Sometimes in a good way, like we need fellowship. Like we need the fellowship of light. That's a good thing. But every once in a while, the fellowship of light needs to descend into darkness. Otherwise, darkness just stays dark. Right? Does that make sense? Like I read my story the other day, someone was telling me, this lady was talking about she was shopping for a flashlight in case of the impending storm with her kid. Her kid was like 5. And as she was getting a flashlight, the kid started putting the flashlight on like in the daytime. And the mom was like, no, you can't use the flashlight here. And the kid was like, of course, mommy, light doesn't work unless it's dark. Duh. She was a great kid. 5-year-old kids always have the best wish. But sometimes, don't you think, like, we miss that part of light, darkness, Hades, cross thing? Sometimes we have gotten used to just doing what we think we're supposed to do in the cycle of Christian service. It's a great cycle. It's a beautiful cycle where we can be faithful, we continue to disciple people, let them grow. But the thing is, the difficult thing is, we have to kind of look a little bit for darkness. It's not hard to find, just in our community, but we have to be willing to go to it. Does that kind of make sense? It makes sense maybe conceptually, but it's just not fun to think about. Maybe, let me give you some examples of gates, or hurdles that maybe are hard to cross. Maybe for us in our individual Sunday school classes, we've got, a particular kid with a whole slew of troubled backgrounds. Maybe that's a gate for them to cross. That could be. Maybe a gate could be stepping into a new service that we're not really accustomed to, we're not really used to. That could be a gate. But whatever it is, the important principle is the principle is, if we are willing to approach. If we are willing to approach a gate, the promises in Matthew 16:18 is the gate will not overtake us. Did I beat that to death?
Repeat that?
Did I kind of hammer that? Did I beat this?
No, repeat
Oh, repeat it, okay. If we are willing to approach a gate, the promise is that gate will not overtake us. Meaning, if I am willing to go to the door, Jesus says 100% of the time, the door will open. I'll give you an example like in how I've tested this theory. Like you guys know, that I'm into evangelism and stuff like that. That's been like my life theme for at least the past 2 years when we said, okay, let's look for gates wherever possible. Maybe sometimes a gate is like the gate of poverty, because when people are really poor, they don't care that you think God is nice and there's salvation or whatever. Sometimes poverty is a gate. And like whether it was different outreaches in New Jersey or New York or whatever, going to people who are homeless, live on the street, who hate life and hate you and hate whoever it is we got for them. And when you show them love every week, week in and week out. Like I just got word, we used to go to the service every week, JC for JC, right? But it's still going on, but we don't go as much. One of the people that we used to serve, some of you guys have been to it, right? A lot of you guys. Still going on here every week. One of the guys that we used to serve, I don't know if you got a chance to meet him. His name was, I won't tell you his name. But he was initially really hesitant to talk to the group, and he was like, usual, just leave me alone, I'm homeless, leave me alone. Eventually he started warming up to the group, eventually he started getting close to the group. And then eventually he went from being very standoffish to being ready to receive the gospel, to hearing about Christ every single week, week in and week out. He was one of those people that would wait for the group to come. And he'd be excited, and something was going on, he'd be kind of protected from the group. So I just heard that he died recently. He was a younger guy, he was, 40s maybe. Got a heart attack, died. And it was very sad to hear that he died, but at the same time it was joyful to know that this dude's life is very different than it was 2 years ago. The fact that he died now, and the fact that if he would have died 2 years ago, would have been very different. That I know, I can attest to. Definitely. God did a great work in this guy's life. Maybe that's a simple gate. Sometimes the gates were like health gates. People are sick, they also don't want to hear about Christ. They don't want to hear about whatever it is that you have to tell them. And it's simple gates, not complicated gates like in the gospel I shared about the story about HIV. I don't know if you guys were all there, right? That's a complicated gate. When someone has HIV and God cures them from HIV, that's a very complicated gate. But somehow God can cure that gate too. I'm talking about where I've seen much simpler things where people are just handicapped or disabled or whatever, and they see that the church, the local community church, cares about them enough to be present. That makes a big difference in their lives. Some of the weirder gates, maybe, I don't know if I've shared with you times in the past or whatever, have been gates of prostitution, or gates of homosexuality, or gates of crime. Being in some neighborhoods that we got to go to where people are just hanging out wearing bulletproof vests. I don't know why they do that. That's weird. People usually hang out, play chess without having war gear on. But some of these neighborhoods, they do have that. And some of these neighborhoods that we've been to, even this town now, if you go a little bit closer to the ferry, you notice that it gets a little bit more interesting. Right, as you go closer and closer. But those neighborhoods, we would think, I wouldn't go there, unless I'm with Wu-Tang or something. But if we decided to go, or when we decide to go, we'll find that people are much more receptive than we could think they are. Like I remember one time we met this guy, I can tell you his name, it was Joe, who was an ex-felon. He just came out of prison. He kind of told us that it was for like murder, but it wasn't a big deal. He was able to serve his time, spent a lot of time, and he kind of came out. But he was like waiting. If that day happened to be the perfect day in this dude's life to hear about Jesus. It was a random Saturday for me. It was a perfect day in his life. And there's like too many stories. I don't even want to bore you with all. But the principle is, I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in the lives of other people around me who don't really know much about much, who are not like super servants, who are not, like veteran Sunday school guys or anything like that. But people that have said, I just know enough to trust God to approach a gate. Second principle I want to share with you is why. Why do we want to do this? Why do we, why? Some thoughts from me. And I want to share with you, not the principles right, but just one that I want to highlight. If I ask you, why would we want people in Staten Island to hear about Christ? Any thoughts? Why would we want to do that? Yeah.
God commanded us to.
Because God commanded us.
And you want someone, if you have the joy and fortune that you're blessed to have Christ, and it would be great to share it. And if you have the, and if you don't,
you can go two ways on that one, right? If you don't, but it would be great to. Okay, that's awesome. What else? Any other thoughts you want to share? Or you can just text to me later or something. Yeah.
So, there's a lot of missionary groups going outside of the country and outside of, say, Staten Island, to spread the word to those who might not have ever heard it before. But there's really not that much focus on just the community within itself. Yeah, they may have heard just a little bits and pieces of this verse or that verse, but they take it and it's kind of like, the wind passing by them. So if we want to evangelize to a community that's outside of our own, then we need to make sure that our community is secure first, so that we can give that as an example.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amen to that. And just with the first bit, because I'll agree with you with everything you're saying, essentially. There's so much missionary work. Like people go to Bolivia and Africa and Zimbabwe and the Netherlands. Like there's a lot of stuff all over the world. Thank God for mission work all over the world, right? But then there's a big need in Staten Island. And people sometimes, you guys remember this verse? We talk about it usually like during Ascension, Pentecostal time. Acts 1:8, when Christ says, you're going to go to Judea and Samaria and all the ends of the world, the earth. And some of the commentary talks about, this is a very important point, your point here of, like, inside church first or outside church first? Which one is it, right? In the commentary, it makes a very critical point to say, it has to be simultaneous. It has to be. The church was always, it never stopped working on Jerusalem, like establishing the church in Jerusalem. It never did, because you really need to establish Jerusalem. We will never stop teaching Sunday school. As a church, we won't, because there's always going to be kids that need to be discipled. Stop running into doors. Like, you have to keep teaching them. You may or may not, but it needs to be there. I remember in this very Sunday school class, one of our shining examples, Bakaboza, when we had a guest speaker, for some reason decided he's not here, so tell him I said this about him.
Oh, he knows.
Right? And I'll tell you, Steve Yahoo was here speaking. We're like, Steve, come, great speaker, whatever, guest. Bakaboza dove across this walk and dove. No Sunday school class will ever teach you not to do that. That's just beyond our training. So we'll always be doing it. We'll always be teaching kids not to dive across and do things like that. But at the same time, there's a need here in Staten Island. There's a gigantic community that we need to be able to meet. Like there was this one book called Love Your City that asks this very important question. Imagine, God forbid, if next week our church was no longer here. It was all transplanted. It was gone. No here. No 495 Amboy Church. It's gone. What would, if we took a survey now of Great Kills, what would the reaction be There used to be a Coptic church here. What do you guys think? Will there be weeping and gnashing of teeth? You know, will people miss us?
There'd be a party.
The Coptic. Yeah.
Especially next door people.
Next door people will be very sad. I know they might commit suicide. They'll be like, who's gonna throw diapers in our area now?
Oh, God.
Who's gonna take our parking spots? You know, who's gonna? We will be missed.
Who's gonna park in CVS?
Who's gonna park? CVS is gonna miss us. You know, who are we gonna almost tow every week? We'll be missed. What if? I mean, we joke about it because it's funny. But that's kind of the case for a lot of Coptic churches, or a lot of churches. Let's not even make this Coptic. A lot of churches, we're in a community, and we're just like annoying the rest of the kids. We're just doing what we can to kind of do our thing. Leave us alone. We're Coptic. We just, unless if it's festival time, come, eat shawarma, pay money, leave. Like, you know what I mean? What if we as a church want to be remembered by the community for something more than that? Yes.
I saw something in East Brunswick Church which really brought something to my attention, and I think that if we can, we just want to stick to each other. We don't want to expand the horizon. We don't really, like, as you can see, the model is just the same people but once or twice, if you find an American, they'll stop by. In East Brunswick Church, I saw, like, during the time of the hurricane, Abuna Mark opened a shelter. Like, he opened the church for a shelter. People came and stayed there. It was kitchen soup. People were all, it was just a community thing. I think these are ways where we can also invite other people to come in. We just want to stick to, you know, our little community Egyptian. We look at the outsiders like, oh, but they're a little different than we are. They're not the same. Open it up. Open it up.
Sometimes we kind of stick together.
That's the part. We don't like each other that much.
We just want to, we're closed in on our little community, but if you open it up, that's the true meaning of opening the community to other people. It's not just about our little, open it up, invite that's my theory on it.
I'm with you. And that's a perfect segue to the little interactive exercise that I want to try with you for today. That'd be cool, you guys have a little interaction. You don't have to move or anything, so don't worry about it.
As long as I don't have to move.
Yeah, I mean, because doors are dangerous. So the exercise will be whether you want to use a smartphone for this or a notepad. But I'm going to ask you a question, because you kind of already did it, but you could do this again if you want. Forget me with me for a second, like your time limitations and how tired you are on a Sunday and all these kind of things. If you could think about Staten Island and two things. If you can just write down thing number one, a need that you think is present in this community. A need. Whether it's I mean, if you drive down Midland, you still see Hurricane Sandy people that are all sandified. That could be something. You know, they got the hurricane thing in Brunswick, we got Hurricane Central. Or whatever the case, I want you to literally do this though. If you can take out your phone to go to the notes section so that you can keep this. If your phone's like dead, you know, rest in peace, use a notepad. With those two things. The first thing being a need. Think about a need. A need that can be as general as you want. Poverty, disease, ugliness, whatever. It's like whatever's on your heart. You know, maybe attraction really needs to be up in the Staten Island. But just a need. That'd be one. Two would be now when you can be a little bit more specific. Now think about a specific demographic. Say if your general need was Sandy, think about how, not the person, I mean, we definitely need you, but if the need was Sandy, think about how Sandy maybe affects high school kids. So I would like to be involved in a tutoring thing. If the need is like health, think about how health affects the elderly. Like think about a specific demographic, is what I'm saying. So one being a need, two being a specific group or demographic that you would like to open it up to, that you would like to see them being loved by Coptic people. So that this time next year, if we ask each other, ask ourselves the same question again, and say, remember that time last year when we joked around about if our church was gone, would we be missed? We'd say, yeah, of course we'd be missed, because our community is loved by blank. They're loved by the fact that we do blank. Take a few seconds to think about it, write it down, and feel free to write down what you want, because this is not like a contract. Because the very least, by the end of this, what we want to be able to do is at least pray for this demographic, pray for this need. And because we're all servants, when I've given this kind of similar interaction, like a younger group, maybe like a high school, college group, they got to go ask their mom and their uncle, and see can I serve the poor? I don't know, whatever. But we're servants, we have servant stuff, servant superpowers. If you wanted to, you can take the need and the demographic, and every single one of us here in this room can take initiative and take a lead on one thing. Just one thing, to love the community one time. If we all did that. Because the rest of us, I can kind of, not guarantee it, but I can encourage you with the fact that the rest of us will go along with you. If Monica says, hey, my thing was, disabled children, I'm going to set up a day where we serve disabled children. We'll come. We'll come. Because we all want the same thing. We all want to love Staten Island. Not like free hugs in Richmond. No, like a real thing. If that's your thing too, I don't know if you want free hugs in the mall. But that would be, it would really change Staten Island, I can tell you that much. Because we're not, Staten Island, if you think about it, we're not Manhattan, there aren't mega churches here. There's a couple. There's Gateway, there's one or two. And I'll tell you, the other Coptic church that's also in Staten Island, not too far from here, also wants the same thing. I'll speak with them in a week or two, and they've wanted to actually do things together. We work together and do something big. Make sense? Yeah. Question?
No, you want us to give you a suggestion now or later?
For now, at least write it. I want to give you one more principle, and maybe we could share together at the end. Would that be cool? At least if you have it. So, the last principle I wanted to give you, or share with you, is why we do this. One of the things that are taught to us by the Eucharist, something that really gripped me. If you ever read this book by St. Basil called On Social Justice, I don't think he titled it that, but it was a collection of his writings on social justice. I asked this question when I was in Cali, seeing Danny, who's a little lady guys, to his class. I don't know if you're there. Said, why is it that we share Christ with someone else? And one of the younger people said, because they have the right to know Christ just as much as we do. They have the right. It's not us feeling charitable. It's not us feeling like, we're so spiritual. We want to tell other people how spiritual they can be. It's a justice issue. It's justice. It's if we believe, really, that people of different heritages, of nationalities in our island deserve to know about Christ as much as we do. On the surface, we're like, of course. Inside, no. A little bit, maybe for me, a little bit. Inside, it's like, no, Jesus is for Egyptians. It kind of goes. Jesus is Egyptian,
What?
Kind of goes. Jesus is Egyptian. Or at least, not Jesus, at least Coptic Jesus. They can have Protestant Jesus, they can have Greek Orthodox Jesus, they can have Catholic Jesus, but they can't have Coptic Jesus, because Coptic Jesus is for Coptic Egyptians.
Right.
I'll tell you, there's this big cult, fun cult, I love cults. This particular one called the Black Hebrew Israelites. Have you guys ever heard of this cult? Wonderful, they're black. They're up? Oh yeah, I shared this before. But if you haven't, let me remind you. So, so they're called the Black Hebrew Israelites. They're basically a black supremacy cult who say that black people and some minorities are superior to white people and Egyptians too. So, sorry. And they believe they actually use the New King James Version of the Bible. They don't use like the Jehovah's Witness Bible, they don't use the Mormon Bible. They use the New King James, same one you read and I read. And they look great. They have really great outfits. They have a Star of David on their forehead and Star of David stuff everywhere. And they believe they're the original Hebrews. Just let me know if you see any correlation between these two things here. They believe they're the original chosen people of God, and they believe their ethnicity is chosen by God to be the best ethnicity ever, and only salvation comes to their own ethnicity. And they're black. I asked them, like, they're black Jews. They're saying Jews are they're saying blacks are the original Jews. I know it's confusing, but it's their thing. Like when I asked them, how can I be saved? They said, you can't. I said, okay. That's short of that conversation. There's a little coffee there.
It's a bummer.
Hopefully there are no correlations between black Hebrew Israelites and Coptic Egyptian Christians. Hopefully there's zero. Right? Hopefully we can't relate to that at all. But we can relate to that a little.
No, now we got the point.
I'm just saying. I don't mean to be offensive. I mean, we're all Egyptian here and stuff. But I've seen non-Egyptian people, get turned away from church, all that kind of stuff. But we won't dwell on that. We want to stay positive. Our moral for that story is we are not like the black Hebrew Israelites. And what we believe about salvation is that it's for all. Look in 1 Timothy 4, right? And we believe it's a matter of equality. Like what St. Basil says is that the Eucharist, the Eucharist teaches us social justice. Have you ever thought about this? You ever think about the fact that when we're in the Eucharist, like, when we line up, no matter how much money you make, or how much money someone else doesn't make, you get the same body and blood of Jesus. No matter how healthy you are, or how sick somebody else, no matter what ethnicity you are, or what ethnicity somebody else, you get the same body and blood of Jesus. Isn't that weird? I would think it should be quantified. I would think that you should be giving a W-2 form beforehand. You should at least be submitting your spiritual rank. The last thing from your father's confession, you get a bigger piece of the body. But it's not. It's not like that, right? No matter who it is. Even if you're someone, whoever. And the reason why that's important is because it's a big difference to believe something is a matter of equality, something is a matter of justice, versus believing something is a matter of charity. Our church now, and I mean the bigger church, not just Stanton Church, but the Northeast, we have begun, I think, over the past couple of years, a beautiful thing of seeing that our community needs us. But we're still doing it a little bit out of charity. The goodness of our heart, we'll go somewhere Thanksgiving and do something great. Out of our abundance of joy, we will have an event. Mesh. But it's very different if we have the moral, spiritual conviction that every person in Staten Island deserves to hear about Christ as much as I do. Equal to me. That's different. Right? Or is that just me? To me, it's different. To me, it's different because one is like a luxury, and one is a responsibility. And not responsibility as a burden, like you were alluding to, because God commanded us to do it, but He didn't command us to do it. Like in 1 John, St. John says, His commandments are not burdensome. They're not supposed to be like, if I don't do it, I'm going to hell. No, it's like an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to actually lift up our entire borough. Make sense? So those are just two simple principles I wanted to share with you. And this was actually one of the few times where I was really, really, really hoping there would be a service meeting. I wasn't sure, I thought it would be canceled. But I was hoping there would be one, because it's been on my mind for a while, and I wanted to share with the servants. And then I wanted us to actually think about this, especially going forward. Regardless of what else is going on in the church, politically and whatever. I don't want to talk about that. Okay, we'll have to at least reference it indirectly. We got to do what we got to do, right? We're the workhorses of the church. No matter who's running the show, no matter who's paying the bills, we got to do what we got to do, right? I wanted to say that as we're in transition, for us to not be stagnant in transition, or to get caught up in other stuff, other peripheral stuff while we're in transition. But to actually get caught up in things that are of great, great importance and great relevance, and things that are going to outlast the other stuff. Does that make sense? With that being said, would you guys be comfortable sharing your ideas together? A little bit, or how about this? We'll have a few seconds, like if we're, I would encourage you, if you are comfortable, like I'll share with you mine. For me, the big thing that's been on my heart for Staten Island for a while, there's a prison over in Arthur Kill. I don't know if it's still active. We almost volunteered there. We went through a lot of paperwork. We were going to get in, and then we didn't. So that's one of the things that I want to try to work on for our group. Like, there's male and female stuff. We can work that out. Because St. Paul says in Hebrews 13:3, remember those in prison as if chained with them. Right? Like, you're right there with them. Remember them as if chained with them. Any other need come into your mind, heart, nose, anything? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily related to something like a prison or a disaster or something, but tutoring at the church would be really good. I mean, that's needed all year long, and I think high school, college, and people above can tutor grade school kids without a problem.
Well, I think we're doing that now.
We are.
Are we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not, I don't think it has reached to the point where it's expanded.
Yeah.
Right now, right about now, I think it's just a church community, but I think we want to make it
We
more
should
known.
put up more signs,
Outside, correct.
like the
correct.
festival, instead of come so we can
Yeah.
feed you.
Till fifth grade only.
If
Yeah.
we could
You
expand.
can do it for high school or intermediate.
Yeah.
So that's even better then, because the fact that it has something already on your heart and the church is taking steps towards it, maybe you can just join in here and see, okay, A, what can I do to help? B, what can I do to expand it a little bit? Because I know, specifically even in our neighborhood, like we had one day where we just went around the neighborhood and just knocked on people's doors, gave them a little gift, said, we're sorry we're annoying, you know, we love you. And they were very happy. They were very happy. They yelled for a while about why they don't like the church, but then they were very nice. And some of them started, when we asked them, hey, like, you know, what kind of needs you have, because they got little kids, or some of them are like elderly people and they need help, or some of them are sick, whatever the case may be. So the point I was making is some of them are kids, like walking distance from you.
Yeah.
So if you could join that tutoring ministry and see, like, that's great, see? That's good, that's a good thing. Others?
The service to the elderly is great.
Service to the elderly. That's a big one too.
I'm just gonna say
We
mine,
just need
it's kinda
somebody
out there,
to
but
take them out.
Right. Just be there to have a conversation even. Okay.
mine's kinda out there, but
Won't judge you.
maybe we could start taking a step toward it. Like, you know how there's like those drug association groups where like they have like people that are drinking and doing drugs and whatever, they come and they just talk and they like introduce themselves. Like maybe we can start doing that towards people that are doing it in the church and people that are not in the church as well even.
Like an
And
AA
introduce
kind of thing.
Yeah, like an AA kind of thing, and introduce like how like God could help them get out of that.
Wonderful. How about this? I'm going to ask you for a favor. If you could Google Project Recovery, can you write that down somewhere? Because one of the reasons why we're sharing this together, one of it is maybe connect resources. Like, you know, I didn't know there was a tutoring thing. You guys did, you know? Maybe he doesn't know about this national thing called Project Recovery that is a Christian-based way of helping recovering addicts. Maybe you can help us, because even through partnership with the clinic, St. Luke's Clinic in Cedar Grove, there are Coptic people who are addicts to stuff, and they're being pulled away from the community, obviously. Like if you're doing heroin, you're not exactly like an active church member at that point. So reaching out to those people, that's a ministry too. That's still a mission, you know, for me. So maybe looking at that and saying, how can we as a church help people who are struggling with any kind of addiction in the island? That would be great. Even if you can help us take a step or two closer, that would be amazing.
We really need professional people in this thing.
Definitely. But
It's not like anyone can handle that.
absolutely.
We need professional people to handle this.
Absolutely, and that's why it's important for us to know what's out there, so that we can, it's like having a referral network, you know? And the point of this is not like, so that we can be clear, we can't be Superman, we can't do all these things ourselves. The point is to see how can we connect to to some resources? How can we connect some professionals? How can we connect some things that are already happening? Like, for example, St. Luke's. Like, it's a Coptic clinic. Raise your hand if you already know about this. Okay, raise your hand if you don't know about this. Okay, this is an important thing for me to tell you. There is a Coptic Orthodox clinic in New Jersey that freely, for free, by professionals, treats all kinds of psychiatric disorders. Whether it's addiction, mental health, whatever, everything on the umbrella of psychiatry. And we've seen a lot of Coptic people. It's 100% Coptic people in this room.
Where did you say?
In McCartan, Cedar Grove.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a drive from here, but it's good. The priest.
What church does it?
Huh?
What car church does it?
No, it's through like the archdiocese. The main person that sees people is Abuna Luke, who's a psychiatrist, and so that's another resource you can connect to. Other thoughts about needs and ministry ideas. We only have 5 more minutes, so keep it early. Yeah.
So there's one thing that I've been thinking about for a little while. I saw this. I was like flipping through channels once, and I was seeing the what is it called now? The GLBTQ whatever parade, and there was on the sides there was one Christian church that all got together, and they had like these shirts on, and it was like Jesus loves you or something like that along those lines. And as the parade was going on, they went out into the parade one by one, and they just gave them a hug, and they told them, hey, Jesus loves you, and so do we. So I feel like that's something that's somewhat lacking within our community, where yes it is a sin, but it's one sin. We all are sinners. It's not something that we can say we are perfect in.
No
And-
committed to this problem. Don't touch. There's no committed. Don't touch.
What?
Can't hug, you know.
I understand.
I love you, but
That's not my point. I don't mean like to go out and hug them.
I'm all for it.
What I was going to suggest was maybe not within the church, if that would be too uncomfortable, but have like a day where we can just go into a community center and say like, we invite you, come have an open discussion, and not about being gay, about no, because
So how is that like? Is that cool? Or?
but really though, like not about being gay, but just having an open
Topic on its own.
an open discussion on
Yes.
on the love of Jesus for everyone.
Yeah.
Amen. Let me share with you something of a little bit of experience. Again, I don't know if this is redundant for anybody else, but in Europe, our team went to the biggest gay pride parade in Europe, in Brighton, UK. Not because we're into that, but just because. Okay, like I know you. Okay, but because of that exact reason. Because most of the time, the homosexual community knows one thing about Christians, which is what the
They
Christians
hate us. Yeah.
which is retarded. It's ridiculous.
It's terrible.
Yes, like you said very clearly. Okay, homosexuality is a sin. And, there's another side. There's the whole other side of the story. So when we were there, we didn't hug people, but we talked to them. We had conversations. We didn't actually invite them anywhere. And here's a beautiful thing, by the way, about like our Orthodox theology is that we have to believe in this incarnational thing of like we must bring the gospel physically to the place that needs it. So in that place, in that parade, just by having conversations with people who are gay and asking them, again, not about being gay, but what they believed about Christ. What do you believe about Jesus? How do you describe it? What was your background like? What's your life like? Conversation and exchange. And so many amazing, amazing conversations where people just opened up to us, said to us, I was raised in this bizarre way. Maybe if I heard about Christ when I was younger, maybe I'd be a Christian by now. The guy told me that was a drag queen. He was wearing a dress. Named Steve. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm glad that was your reaction, Mom. Because in our heart, that's like, ew, like yucky. Some sins are yucky, some sins are not so yucky.
All sins are good.
All sins are yucky. There you go, that's what I'm saying. Yes.
This big, like,
Yeah.
we raised as Egyptian, very sensitive to this part.
Yes.
To the truth. And I'm being patient sometimes. I talk with them. Like, I try to myself find مثلا drawing على cross على البلاد بتاعهم. ممكن أتكلم عن شفت مرة موضوع الدراك دين قلت له اقرا مثلا بداية really close to Revelation 12 and he write it down. Get two patients and they're like lesbians. فأنا شفت هناك لو كروس على بعد ما مشيت I say how come يعني I missed the opportunity knowing like I'm supposed not to know but I know it as like I'm supposed to take this opportunity to talk which has the crossover I can talk about Christ but you know what knowing that they are lesbian or gay sometimes you back up to talk about Christ with these people. This really like we miss this part like in my mind I don't talk with them. Why I talk with them about Christ? So after she left, I said, I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to talk and take the opportunity that she has a cross to start talking about Christ. But
that's so honest. I'm really glad that you shared that because it's so true, and it's both in our Egyptian community and even in our American communities. Even though now we're integrating more and whatever, but we still have